And I am back. This is the Solo Gamer, and we are back in EDF6. As I promised you last time, today we'll be looking at the Air Raider and Fencer characters. And we'll be going back to the ruined future so I can keep up the theme here. Now, the Air Raider is unique in that it isn't actually a like direct action assault unit. Yeah. He does have the ability to fire weapons, but for the most part his weaponry is situational. It's mostly designed for the purpose of doing sort of like long-range tactical engagement. He's not like a head-on soldier, as the saying goes. To his advantage, though, in the future he gets drone weaponry, and in the past he gets artillery, bombers, all kinds of stuff. For example, with these little drones, I can target enemies and have them engage other forces while having drones do my bidding. Basically, it's two different characters in one. One's a sort of drone minion assault operator, but then in the future, he's essentially a high-speed, heavy attack master, and he does just ridiculous levels of firepower. See?
Food supplies. I'm envious of that too. You should get that too.
And see, the drones will swarm in and just start absolutely ruining these things' days. Which makes them super useful, but kind of weird. Still, I kind of love them. And they also, like, you still get artillery, but it's not quite the same as it used to be. Because now it's being delivered by drones rather than being delivered by, actual artillery. But watch. Off he goes! Highly effective. Very long range. But you can only use one particular type at a time, which means you have to actually make a decision what firepower you're going to be bringing to the table. The limpet gun can always be used as a fallback. And it is highly effective, like, no doubt. Aw, he's limping away because they blew his arm and leg off. Oh, I'm sorry. Running away? I don't think so. But yeah, the Air Raider is kind of like the ultimate high damage, low mobility character in a sense. He can do ungodly amounts of firepower in a limited area. Problem is, that limited area comes with its consequences. You cannot use all the weapons at once. You have to rely on whatever you've got in your system, no matter what the enemy is. And there's sometimes when what you've got isn't going to work. It's basically meant for like large-scale battles, and it's basically meant for like large-scale ground control and heavy-duty assault. But like, there's all kinds of stuff that could go wrong with it. But yeah, I love the Air Raider. He's essentially like, oh, you want to nuke the world? Fine. Here's your methodology. Nuke the world. He's also good at clearing fields. Because the mortars, like, they'll just land and start wrecking stuff. You hit them with enough firepower, they'll bring the building down for you. They also have, the drones actually have like the little buzzing audio sound, which is a neat touch.
Aliens sighted! Aliens are leading
Yeah.
monsters in!
I like the Air Raider, especially if you're playing solo. At higher levels, they become one of the most effective solo runs in the game, simply because their firepower makes them almost unstoppable. Excuse me. But yeah, that's really all there is to the Air Raider. He's essentially just concentrated firepower in a specifically located area. Very handy for certain missions, not good for certain others. Anything underground, he's useless at. Because the underground missions, you're such tight confines that the drones actually have a hard time, and you can't use any artillery weaponry. So it does limit you. You can still do the job, like the Limpet guns, some of the other weapons, some of the other drones, but you're definitely better off relying on like a ranger for those kinds of missions, at least initially. Later on, when you unlock some of the better weaponry, it can be very effective. Oh, looky here. We have some unwanted company. Let's shred it. See, that's where the Air Raider absolutely becomes just a fucking beast. Just spread the damage everywhere, just non-stop, horrific damage to everything that moves. And then have a little drone backing you up at the same time, and that makes you almost unstoppable. Like with the right gear, with the right loadout, the Air Raider is essentially a one-man army.
Maybe we should seriously consider eating the monsters.
Okay, that's harder than I've already tried. Get it? Just worry about not getting eaten yourself.
But-
Ended up getting eaten by the monster that came out of it. Don't try anything stupid.
But yeah, I love this game series. It's one of those weird sort of esoteric games. It's not going to win any awards, and it's definitely not going to be... You're definitely not going to get any, like, major, kudos for its existence. Now, that being said, I didn't mention this in the last... I didn't mention this in my last video, but I'm actually playing this on the PS5, and I will tell you why. When they launched this on the PC, they launched it with a requirement to run Epic Game Store. That has been a catastrophe. Now, they're saying that they're going to remove that, but it has other problems on top of that. The most notable being that, yes, you can run it on the PC, but there is an issue. That issue is the fact that when run on the PC, you have no way of saying it's a windowed mode. You have no way of saying it's a window borderless. You have no way of changing its configuration or settings. There's no launcher, there's no nothing. So if you use anything, and I mean anything, that doesn't natively support full screen, which my TV does not, at least not through my PC for some reason, you are more or less screwed. Unless you can get in there and change the settings somehow, you're screwed.
And there are aliens with them!
And this is something that was present in the previous game. This is something that's present in the current game, and I was just absolutely blindingly infuriated by it. Like, I love the Earth Defense Force series. It's one of my absolute favorites. And I think that D3's inability to have a properly configured configured menu launcher and system launcher from the get-go. On top of the fact that they don't even bother having like NVIDIA support for it, so you can change the settings in NVIDIA, is just stupid. Now, granted, D3, their whole thing is that they make games that are surprisingly good for relatively cheap. You know, credit where it's due. That's kind of their whole deal. But that doesn't change the fact that at a practical level, that is an absolutely just blindingly irritating annoyance. You know, you should be able to set the system configuration however you want from the get-go. And I think it should be just like standard policy that every game should have a launcher in the initial setup so that you can change the settings right out of the gate. And I think the fact that it lacks that is one of the things that hurts it on the PC, because it means that there's some people who just can't use it because of hardware limitations or configuration issues or what have you. Yeah, I know, it's weird, it's a first world problem, and I get that. And like I said, I just got on the PS5 anyway because I happen to have both EDF 5, 6, and 4 on this platform, so I didn't mind. But it's one of those things where I feel like if they really want to break into the PC market, they have got to start taking that seriously. One interesting thing is that when you use any of these things, even if you switch weapons midway through, they still go and do their job. So you can deploy your drones, switch to your limpet, and keep fighting. It's handy, but, you know, it's kind of like trying to juggle. You're always trying to keep on top of things. Aww, did you lose your arm? Now you lost your face. Like I said, Air Raider, definitely a favorite of mine, simply because the sheer firepower it can bring is almost unmatched. Oof. Tore that poor bastard's head right off. But yeah, like with this setup, I'm more or less just it almost turns the game into a point-click adventure. You point at something, you click at something, and watch your drones go on an adventure to kill it. A notable thing, though, you cannot run as a air raider. You can dodge, but you cannot run. So you are left with a situation where you have to, essentially, for lack of a better word, you have to sort of trundle along at a low speed and just get there when you get there. Which is why so much of his armament is long range. The city's empty, dude. But yeah, so that's Air Raider, and I love Air Raider because he's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to basically go in and absolutely wreck shit. And as with the last one, the Air Raider gets priority hardware, so he gets more gear than the other two or three classes. But now I can switch over to Fencer. And the Fencer carries a variety of heavy weaponry. Now, here's the thing. You can carry up to 4 weapons. And each weapon is its own weapon on its own. And of course, like there's the anime influence with the disguised body pillow as a joke and everything. And then there's the sword which helps with different things, but I always prefer to have like just sheer firepower. And the Bloodstorm is great because it like, you know, the unit can just do absolutely ridiculous damage. But there's a price. You have to choose between long range and short range, and then you have to choose between you have to choose your specialty and equipment. And then you can also change your color. Like the main color I usually go with is this gray. But then for the highlights I use the purple. Alright, so Fencer it is, and then we will do the cleanup, the hive cleanup. Ooh, I picked the right gear for this one. Except if it's the hive cleanup, you do not want the flame revolver. You absolutely want that Gatling gun. Actually, no. Now that I think about it, if I'm going up against the hive, I should probably be doing close combat. But yeah, I'll demonstrate. Here we go. So you get a wide variety of weaponry with this character.
Looks like we're hunting the skies today.
And you have a shield.
The monsters have no right to live here.
And you have your booster, and you have your sword. So you can fight at close range. You can fight at long range, but then you can actively switch between every weapon at the same time. And they all have unique properties. Like the Bloodstorm is a massively powerful long-range missile, and the Armhound is a weaker but more numerous missile. See what I mean? On the other hand, though, the biggest weakness of the Fencer is range is a massive issue. Most of this weaponry has significant range limitations, and most of them depending upon their configuration, have major reload time issues. So with the Fencer, the biggest challenge is picking the right weaponry and loadout for every mission and making sure you're equipped to handle it. On the other hand, you have the right loadout, they can turn what would normally be a pitched battle into a cakewalk. If you have the wrong loadout, you just get swarmed and slaughtered. They're ironically like the least effective enemy. They're like the least effective enemy against the insects, but against like other foes like the androids and other armored enemies, their sheer firepower makes them an absolute nightmare. Here, catch that. But yeah, like the Fencer is essentially a walking tank.
Destroy the nest. The monsters' numbers will never decrease. Shoot the nests.
Biggest issue with this loadout, and I realize it now, is that despite being missiles, the range is horrid. Watch this. Goodbye, Nest. See?
Find them all. Destroy them.
Yeah, like the future sucks because apparently, like, the future really sucks because there's not enough food. They're constantly fighting to survive. They never have enough resources or, manpower to win the fight. So they're constantly just fighting for survival. Yeah, like I said, each class is unique, and that's what's kind of fun about them all, is that they all have their own unique weaponry, their own unique equipment, their own hardware. And every last one has their own role in the game. I kind of wish this thing had a faster reload. That reload is awful. Let's go ahead and wrap these guys up here. And like the biggest issue with the Fencer is always that it's speed. Like it is by far the slowest category in the game. And that's just I'm just being honest here. Like it is a powerhouse, but it is so unbelievably slow. On the other hand, like I said, on the other hand, there are certain jobs that it absolutely excels at. One of them is just like straight up point blank annihilation. Like if you want something absolutely obliterated in the blink of an eye, that's when you bring in these bad boys. They pack the biggest fire. Yeah, like this thing at close range. This thing one shots pretty much everything that isn't elite or heavy unit. Even the armored enemies will be absolutely just shredded to bits by this thing.
At this point,
You'll burn your brains out.
Because in the last game they discussed the fact like the monsters are like actually created to be inherently toxic to human beings. Like, yeah, gee, bad enough that you're using. An interesting thing that is notable about this is you never really knew what kind of damage you were doing in the previous games. I do like the fact that they've added like a damage counter now where you can see what kind of firepower you're actually inflicting on your opponents. It's helpful. Yeah, like the yeah, as you can see, the fencer can take an absolute pounding. They can definitely dish it out, but their penalty is in speed. Like they are slow as balls. And their range is also pretty pitiful. Even with their supposedly long range gear, they are still vastly inferior in terms of ranged combat to, say, even the Air Raider or the Ranger. Although, to be fair, the Ranger does have, like, they do have dedicated, like, long range weapons, so that's a thing. That's one of the. I think there's one more nest somewhere. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, the Fencer's definitely the most difficult class to master, but they're also the most absolutely devastating once you have them worked out. Like, a fully loaded Fencer with the right armament is a walking apocalypse. And I mean that like with absolute sincerity. Like I played as a fully kitted out fencer in the 5th game, and they essentially are just like absolute abominations. They will turn an entire battlefield into absolute ruin instantaneously. And there's certain weapons they have that, like in the 4th game, they had a weapon. I forget what it was called, but they had a 4th game weapon. It was an end game weapon. Like it was something you got only at the higher difficulties, where they would actually like it would actually literally just fill the entire area with so much explosions that it would actually lag the game. Which in a game that uses such simplistic graphical systems, that says something when it's so overwhelming it's actually overloading the game outright. See, they're so close now. I can just bust out the sword on these bastards. Glad I got those booster upgrades. Else I'd be in real trouble.
Rackles attack everyone's afraid. See, I'm not as strong as you.
Dude, I'm in a mech suit. No one's as strong as I am right now.
Work sure ain't easy, huh? You'll be better. Don't lose hope.
Alright, so there you have it. So yeah, each of these categories, each of these units is a self-contained force on its own, but they basically all have a gimmick or a system that they use. And the fencers is I am essentially Iron Man, and I'm also carrying enough armament to pulverize half the universe. It's not like my favorite class, but it works really well for the purposes it has. And each character has functions that they use that work in certain timelines, like the Emerald, the Ranger's weapons are almost all universally available, so there's no big deal. But then you have like the Air Raider, where half his stuff changes depending upon what timeline he wound up in. And then you have the absolutely ridiculous firepower. Oh, I'm probably gonna need the rocket launcher for that one. So you get the rocket launchers here, which I really wish they'd give you more of them, because it feels like, aside from the Goliath, the only real viable ones are these two at the start. And even then, that's only because they're the ones with the best range. Now, for this, I actually prefer this weaponry, the Minion Buster, simply because it's actually, it's not, it doesn't have the rate of fire, but it hits harder and has dual damage, because it hits once, then it explodes. So you got double the damage punching out through it, which makes it very handy. But anyway, we're at 30 plus minutes, and I never go past 30, so I'm gonna cut it here. But I'll probably do more on this down the road once we get more of the missions unlocked and have some of the better weapons available. But yeah, EDF 6 definitely a continuation of the franchise worthy of its name, and definitely fun. It has a much more interesting story, but that's not saying a whole lot because it's goddamn EDF. It's not like the story is the big thing. The time travel aspect is fun, and they do make it keep looping back on itself to keep adding more to it, which is really cool. But it has its problems. And the biggest one right now is the PC port is shite. If you have no other choice, get it, because they are going to take out the Epic Games Store requirement. But if you have a PS5, just run the PS5 version. It's just easier. Anyway, I'll see you next time. This is The Solo Gamer. You may call me Matt. Have a great night.